We're going to get started. Alicia, thank you for taking time out of your incredibly chaotic day. You're good at chaos. That's why you are the special guest host slash guest interviewee on on episode 4. So we're a month in, REI 101. We got a lot of really good stuff in store for the month of May. So I know that people will be jumping on. But today we're going to be talking about all of the dumpster fires that we deal with when we go into contract. It's not always a smooth ride, is it?
No, never.
No, never is it. In fact, you're probably in the middle of dealing with several forms of chaos. Am I right?
Yes.
So, welcome to REI 101. This is our fourth episode in. This is our this is our way to educate. This is our way to give tools to the investors to empower the people. Um, we want to help you grow your real estate portfolio, help you provide you with options and clarity around that. And so, I've asked Alicia to jump on today. So this is definitely somebody that has made my entire career possible. We've been working together, what, about
Five
five and a
years?
half, over 5 years, right?
Yep.
So, and you stepped into chaos when you joined the team. So you're
Right.
no you're no stranger to a real estate dumpster fire. So we're going to be talking about some of the wacky things we've seen. So Alicia owns Southern Charm, uh, uh, S- Southern.
Southern Charm closings.
I was going to say Southern Charm transactions. I'm like, but that doesn't sound right. Southern Charm closings. So she definitely is a closer. We go under contract. She's going to help us get to the closing table with as few headaches as possible. So, really want you to get to know Alicia. She's been a key component in our team and our success the past 5.5 years. Our goal today is to break down just the full contract to close process, giving an idea of what to expect each step of the way. So, if you have questions, please jump in with your questions. Please let us know what questions you might have for Alicia. Um, Pop quiz. I want you to share this in the chat box. What point of the contract to close stage do you think the most deals die? When do you think the most deals die? Is it when we make the offer? Is it during the option period? Is it due to financing? Or is it at the closing table for some reason? Drop your guess in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, we can hear from you. When do deals die? We'll give you just a minute. Okay, so I got option period. I would say a lot of deals die in the option period. We'll talk about that. Any other guesses? I have had everything was going perfect. I was a buyer on this transaction, and the deal died at the closing table. So we can talk about that. Alicia, where do you think most deals die?
Um, I would say usually option period or even the appraisal lately has been a huge issue.
Oh yeah, historically appraisals have not really been that much of an issue, but recently they have been popping up, haven't they? So we have some stories to tell about that. We have something interesting we just pulled off with the low appraisal that I want to definitely talk about. So let's go ahead and get into it. So part one, we're looking for deals. We're scouring through the MLS or off-market properties, or we're looking at wholesale deals, or so many different ways that we're finding deals. Part one, making an offer. This is the contract creation stage. So, first thing, Alicia, what would you say most people don't understand about this part, about writing the offer, submitting it?
Um, Maybe the fees that are upfront costs on it.
Yeah, so you're talking about like option fee and escrow fee?
Yeah.
Okay. What about when
I
it comes to just writing the offer? Because I know we have people that just expect you to write an offer like in 5 seconds. And
um
oh,
well, like I mean, if any agent I've seen a lot of people are with all the changes and everything that have been happening in paragraph 12. So the new spot for the commission, and then you have the seller concession. People are confused whether the commission is supposed to go in paragraph 12 or at the bottom of the contract, which this could all be changing again soon anyway.
so that so we use, if you don't know this, as real estate professionals, we use the TREC promulgated forms. These are forms written by the Texas Real Estate Commission, but they are, how often they're updated like constantly, aren't they? Like
Mhm.
how many up revisions have we had in the last 5 years, do you think?
Quite a few. I mean,
Probably
quite a few.
more than five, maybe 4 or 5, I would say. They're constantly being updated. Now, let me ask you this. The last updates were really important because there was a huge multi-billion dollar lawsuit that resulted in some changes. On our listings, how many agents are still sending outdated contracts to us?
I've had a few. I've had actually quite a few.
So it's surprising. And so when agents are sending out outdated contracts, do you think their clients are even aware that these contracts are outdated?
No, they wouldn't know what to
They're,
look for.
yeah, like how would they know that they're signing contracts that are not even recommended to be used? So that's, I think that's happening a lot. Another thing I don't think people realize is how much time it takes. Because how long is a contract? How many pages, how many sections?
There's 11
100.
pages. No, 10, sorry, 10, 11. There's 11.
And how much time does it take to write a proper contract, offer contract?
I mean, like for me, it only takes like a couple minutes, but I have everything. I have a lot of stuff pre-filled because a lot of the stuff can't stay the same. So a lot of the options that vary, I leave those blank, but everything else is just kind of pre-filled, so it's easy to fill out. But I mean, you could take a good like 15, 30 minutes to fill out an offer.
Yeah, yeah. You could do it faster. You have a system in place. You have a process for doing it. We write a lot of offers. Do all of our offers get accepted?
No.
No. So common pitfalls, I put some notes down. Tell me if you can think of something else. Uh, Terms are completely wrong. Missing documents, wrong terms. We had, no title or title company. What are some other issues that we often see with contracts that just slow the whole thing down?
Um, I mean, I think you pretty much hit it. The title company has always been the biggest one, going
Hmm.
back and forth with them on that. Or like a lot of the time on option fee, a lot of people like to lowball option fee a lot, or they don't put enough earnest money down. And so sometimes that'll come back.
Yeah, yeah,
Forms, I mean, it depends on the form, but usually, like, if we can at least get the contract going, like, if we have an HOA form we need or a MUD form, we can always get that signed after the contract and just get it going.
got it,
So it just
got it.
depends on the form.
Anything else on making an offer? So you write an offer. Let me ask you this. We write an offer for one of our buyer clients. They Liv is on the call. I see her. Thanks for joining us, Liv. And now we need her to sign. How often do these transactions slow down because we're just not getting signatures? Like how often do we just find ourselves waiting for signatures from people?
On contracts, it really isn't that bad, because we usually normally like we'll send it out and we'll send a text right after, letting them know, hey, we're waiting on signatures, and people are pretty responsive through that.
Now, yeah. So now we have an offer contract. So the first really critical point, and this may be up for discussion, but the offer number, the price on the contract, that's that's not the price we're going to close at, is it?
Right.
Like how often do we actually put an offer in for $200,000 and we close at $200,000?
I mean, it usually, I would say like it's a high chance that it's going to change either price reduction or seller concession.
So if you're taking notes, I would say number one, the offer price is not the same as the closing price. The offer price that we put on the contract, that helps us get under contract. Once you, as a buyer, are under contract, you are in control of the situation. So, one kind of mistake I feel like a lot of buyers, or I would say misconception, is they want to start negotiating other terms, other details. They want to negotiate repairs, things like that, which you don't have to do that up front. The whole purpose of writing the offer is to get under contract. Once you get under contract, that's pretty significant because the seller, at that point, they're not legally able to entertain offers from any other buyers, right? Did you want to add anything to that?
No?
So we're going to go back and forth. They're going to hate your offer. Most of the time for investors, your offer is not going to get accepted. We may do some back and forth and negotiate, but we find the right deal. We find the right seller. We match the deal together, and then we do go under contract. We get an executed contract. Buyer signs, seller signs. Pretty straightforward. We're now in the the option period. The contract has been executed. So players to keep in mind during this, we have lenders involved. I see Aiden from Flash Rays. He may be the buyer's lender. The seller's agent may want to have a conversation with the lender. That's pretty normal for us. Like we really, when we have a listing and somebody has a lender, we want to know a little bit about that lender to know if they're legit, to know how, if these deals are going to make it all the way through. There's also title company. So there are some good title companies, some bad title companies. Who chooses the title company? How do we choose what title company to use?
That's usually up to whoever's paying title policy. Normally it falls on the seller, but it's up to negotiations when you're doing the offer. So we have had the buyer pay for the title policy and we've allowed the buyer to pick the title company.
Yeah, especially like if the buyer's paying for the title policy, they should, but
Right,
most of the time it's on the listing side
right.
because if it's our listing, we may have the title company open title, do a title search, at the beginning of it, especially if we are kind of confused or unclear on who actually owns it and who actually doesn't, and if there's any liens on the property that we may need to know about. It's good to get title to open that right away. Did you have any other tips about executing the contract or going under contract or the option period?
Mm-mm.
So let's dig into the option period because this is where you say the most deals are going to die during this option period, right?
Yep.
So players that are involved in this option period, inspectors. So we recommend all of our buyers hiring an inspector. Now the inspection, it's important, but I think it's important for buyers to understand when you get an inspection, your inspector's supposed to check everything out. They're going to give you a whole list of 100 things that are wrong with the properties. Anybody on this call that has bought or sold, you know what I'm talking about. Those inspection reports are going to have tons of issues. Are we trying to get the seller to fix everything on the report?
No.
It wouldn't be realistic to do that at that point. So, what we're looking for when we're negotiating anything that's on the inspection report, we're looking for anything that's expensive. So, anything expensive that's going to cost a lot of money, anything that is a health hazard or safety hazard. Those are the three things. If there's electrical problems, or if there's major plumbing issues, or if the roof is about to fly off. Now, investors, we know we our job is to rehab and make an improvement. So we just make adjustments. So most of the time, what we're going to recommend is if there is 30 or 40 or $50,000 worth of issues on that inspection report, we get to renegotiate. We get to push for another price reduction. So there's our second point right there to negotiate for the buyer is when we're in the option period, we get the inspections. and then we just discover if there's any other issues there. Anything else to think about during the inspection period? We talked about
I mean,
inspect. You may,
you can also like shop for insurance during this time too as a buyer. We have had people shop up front to get an idea, especially if it's in a flood zone, because that can really make or break a deal.
yeah, insurance can really kill a deal right now. Some places it's going down, but we see deals like, especially in Galveston County, we see deals completely unravel because the insurance is just crazy. How often is the seller's insurance policy assumable by the buyer?
It usually is for flood. Like we haven't had too many problems with that transferring over.
So sometimes that's an option. Liv, you got a question?
I was just thinking about how in our case it was so weird because because I don't know if you remember all the details. I'm sure you probably have a super good memory for details actually, but the seller had many properties and they didn't need insurance, so they didn't even have
Yeah.
insurance. And then we almost literally lost the deal several times, as you recall. But one of them was because we couldn't find insurance that would fit into the mortgage agreement. And so that literally took us like hitting the streets and like asking everyone we knew to
Hmm.
refer different insurance people to us. And like that was one of the most surprising things to me about the whole thing. Like I never in a million years would have understood or known that insurance would have played such a big role.
Yeah.
And so I mean, honestly, I'm just so grateful because in the last second we found the right insurance agent who would write something that actually didn't insure it enough for what we wanted, but now we've gone in and gotten more insurance on it
Hmm.
just to make it work with the bank.
No, that's very good. And but it also shows that resilience pays off because if we would have just gone with the, first two or three quotes that we got, we may not have been able to close that deal. So kudos to you for digging deep and finding a policy that made the deal. We had a really creative lender. Like everybody was really pulling together to get creative because it was, and I want to talk about your deal more when we talk about the appraisal period in a minute, but it was pretty wild. But I'm gonna give you a couple of absolutely basic tips that easily get forgotten about when it comes to inspection. Is number one, if there's a tenant on the property, make sure that everybody knows that there is an inspection. Make sure the inspector knows that. Make sure that there is access to the property, uh, despite the fact that there's a tenant on place. That is the seller's agent or the seller's responsibility to to make sure that there's full access to the entire property by the inspector. Sometimes in those type of situations, an agent's going to need to be present, or somebody's going to need to be there. Most of the time, it's not an issue. Most tenants are cool. They understand that things happen, but every once in a while, we're going to get somebody who's a little spicy, who's going to make everybody's life a little more challenging. Am I right? Right.
Hmm.
So, number two, uh, in addition to making sure that the inspector and your contractors have full access, I would say this is very obvious, but it comes up. Make sure the utilities are on, because that creates so much of a headache. Inspector gets to the property and there's no power, or there's no heat, or there's no gas. And what happens? The inspector has to come back. And then in order for the inspector to come back to the property, they're going to charge somebody. They're going to expect to get paid because that's taking time from their day to come back to the property. So, yeah, make sure the full property is accessible. Make sure all the utilities are on. And here's a third tip. If you have one of those properties that you know is going to need a lot of work and you have contractors coming to the property, I would recommend coordinating to have everybody go there at the same time, especially if there's a tenant in place, because it's easier to get a contractor and an inspector through the property if it's all at the same time. If it's a larger, that's even more so true on like larger multifamily where you may have like a team for plumbing and a team for electrical, and they're going through every single unit to coordinate inspections with. We did a 60 unit some time ago. That was that was a very stressful ordeal, and it would have been impossible to get everybody through every unit if we had done that on separate days. So getting everybody in there at the same time. Here's my fourth tip. Do it as soon as you can. Do not wait. Time kills deal. You'll hear me say this 100 times. Time kills deals. So if today's Monday, if we go under contract Monday, I really, really want that inspector there Tuesday morning. Monday night is better. The sooner they can get there. And this is why, as a buyer, your time is money. And the longer you're tied to that property, the more it's going to cost you in time, which equates money. Number two, if you're the seller, same thing. If for some reason this property is not going to work out for the buyer, we need to get back on market as fast as possible. And so we really don't want to, whether you're buying or selling, there's no reason to wait more than a couple of days to get the inspections done. Do you agree, Elisha?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and negotiations, whatever comes back, or if we need to send more people out there for stuff, like it takes up a lot of time.
Yeah.
And
So
then
if
we're
there's
running
like,
up against like option period day where it's like 4 o'clock and we're getting an amendment out on option
yeah,
day. It's
yeah. And you always run that risk of losing the earnest money if, you get up to the option period and you don't extend or you don't terminate and the option money goes hard. And so
Mhm.
we'll talk a little bit about that. But any other questions about the option period, the inspection period in general? In commercial, we call it feasibility period. So move fast and do it all at the same time. Um, so once so say we have a 7-day option period. Once we get past that option period, during the option period, we negotiate for repairs. Usually for investors, we're going to get some type of price reduction or a seller concession. We agree, we move past option, and then the earnest money goes semi-hard. I'll say it goes semi-hard because there are some ways for the buyer to get the earnest money. But once we go into a finance period, Alicia, what happens during that financing period? What's important there?
Well, we do the appraisal, which is the biggest thing.
So with
You mean
appraisal, what's the purpose of the appraisal?
to find out the value of the house?
And who needs to know that?
The buyer, well, the lender.
Right? The buyer needs to know. And unfortunately, I run good comps. I usually have a pretty good idea. But at the end of the day, the appraiser is going to make the final decision. So the lender will order the appraisal, and it's to justify the value of the contract. So if we're under contract for $200,000, the lender's lending based on that sales price. Now, the lender's going to hire a third party appraiser. They're going to go out to the property. And first tip, Liv can attest to this. Make sure that the tenant knows, if there's a tenant in place, make sure the tenant knows that the appraiser's going out there. Make sure there are no man-eating dogs on the property or any wild animals that are going to scare the appraiser away because it's hard to get them back. And if they don't come back, in your case, I remember in that case, the appraiser was so backed out with bookings that she wasn't able to come and that really put a big delay on it. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't her fault. It was the seller's fault and the tenant that they weren't prepared for an appraiser to show up. So the appraiser goes out, and I'll give you an example of a pretty crazy story. In most cases, we're under contract for 200. They're going to appraise it for a little bit more than 200. That's 90 to 95% in if you have a different experience, tell me. However, it usually is going to appraise. If it appraises a little bit higher than the contract value, no big deal. The lender's happy, the buyer's happy. It makes me, as your buyer's agent, look good because I negotiated well. However, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, maybe it was 3 weeks ago. Alicia can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong. We had a house under contract for $270,000 in Galveston. It was a brand new construction in Galveston. And we got a notification that the appraisal came back and the appraisal was low. And I see your question. This is a very good question. I think I may answer it in the story. So the appraisal came in at 257,000. So before I called my seller, because I was representing the seller on this one, I tried to gather as much information as I can, including the appraisal, which took a few more days to get in. I wanted to look through that appraisal. And in times past, I have had luck. I've been able to talk to the appraiser, ask questions, have a conversation. Sometimes in a couple of circumstances, the appraiser was generous and took something into consideration that I mentioned, or maybe they were missing information that I had. And so we have been able to protest the appraisal and get the appraisal up. This is when we're on the listing side. On the buyer side, if this property appraises low, I'm just going to go and say, hey, I'm going to go to the agent or I'm going to go to the seller and I'm going to say, here's a low appraisal. We're just going to retrade this. So here's your third opportunity as a buyer to negotiate the sales price of your property. We're gonna we're gonna ask for a lower price. And a lot of times they're like, yeah, you can't really argue with an appraisal. The appraisal is low, so we'll reduce the price of the house, or or we'll meet in the middle. If the seller does not agree to reduce the sales price, then the buyer has a choice. They can either terminate, and if they do decide to terminate, they will get their earnest money back. However, if they love that property so much, they may be willing to make the gap. So in this case that we were under contract for 270. Appraisal came in for 257. We had a gap of $13,000. Hi, sweetie. How are you? Oh my gosh. Um, I love babies. All my babies are big people now. So we had a gap of $13,000. And on this house in Galveston, what we did for the seller is we were able to negotiate, and we had never done this before. The buyer did not have the cash position to pay that gap, and the lender wasn't going to fund on more than 257. But what the buyer did agree to, and come ask me 6 months from now, ask me how this worked out. But the seller and the buyer agreed to finance the difference. So there was a gap of $13,000. The buyer is going to make payments as a promissory note. It's not tied to the real estate. But the buyer's going to make payments to the seller. This only worked for this buyer because the buyer just loved the house. Um, and otherwise, the seller, we would have had to go back to market or we would have had to drop the price. So can the buyer influence the appraiser in the terms of price or value? Yeah. So we can provide the main way we can influence the appraisal is by providing our own comps, our own market analysis. Same thing with the seller too. So the seller has the same. What we can't do is we can't bribe the appraisal. We'll lose our license like immediately. So that you can't really bribe, but you can offer data, you can offer information, you can ask questions. In one case, we had a contract. We were at 157. It appraised at 153. I called the appraiser. And I said, "Hey, we were under contract and it appraised 4,000 low." And her response was, "No, it didn't. I appraised it at 2,000 above the contract." I'm like, "Well, we're at 157 and you appraised it at 153." She goes, "I thought you were under contract at 151." And I looked at the contract and the seven was written by hand and the seven looked like a one. I'm like, you know what? I think that seven kind of looks like a one, but it's actually a seven. And she said, "Let me take a second look at it." And she said, "Okay, look, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna go back to the house. I'm gonna take some new measurements and then I'll get back with you." And she came back and appraised it for 159. So sometimes it's just having an honest conversation can be helpful, and that went a long way. So yeah, you can have some influence over it. So any other thoughts about appraisal, or do we have any questions about the appraisal period?
I you don't mind, I'd like to chime in with one
Hey,
unsolicited
Aiden,
remark. How's it going,
absolutely.
man? So, as a lender, I have protested hundreds of appraisals in my time, and the most surefire way to get shut down completely from an appraiser is to just tell them they're wrong and go in a completely different direction of as to why, right? Always good to give some comps that they may not have seen, but there's usually a reason they didn't choose it. So I have always had the best luck in disputing appraisals. If you go down further in the appraisal, there is a comment section where they go through their philosophy and they talk about why they did what they did. And they'll talk about the comps they chose and why they chose them. And sometimes they'll talk about comps that they didn't choose. The best way to get an appraiser to revise their value is to use their logic against them, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Look through those comments. Again, figure out the narrative of why they did what they did and why they valued them, and then use those points and find comps that fit those points better than what you used. Because if you just flat out tell them they're wrong, they're going to shut you down real quick,
Yeah.
right? You got to use the direction they're going and just kind of push them a little farther in that direction.
And you can add value too. Uh, they I found that appraisers love the question like, oh, by the way, do you happen to do private appraisals? Like just kind of throwing like there may be some opportunity for me to help you grow your business and get you other business and asking them, you know, I need somebody, do you do land or do you do commercial or having a conversation with them like that where you can kind of sow some good seeds into the situation. I find go a long way, especially in the commercial world because it's so difficult to run comps, especially like on land or mobile home parks or RV parks. I remember every appraiser that I've spoken to, I save their information, they're tagged in our system. And so I can just call appraisers and say, hey, have you seen anything like this? We're selling a property and I'm having a hard time getting because in the state of Texas, there's very limited data when it comes to commercial assets. Alicia, do you have any other thoughts about the appraisal period or some of the issues that we face there?
No, I think you've covered most of it.
So once we go through that, then if we decide to terminate due to low appraisal, the earnest money goes back to the buyer.
As long as it's covered under the third party financing.
Okay, go
Because
into
some appraisals come back after the financing period has ended, which you want to keep an eye on because you want to make sure the appraisal comes back within the finance period.
and most buyers are not even going to know what's happening there. So there's a finance period, there's a financing date. Now that financing date specifically refers to uh to the buyer's financing ability, right?
Right.
And then
Yes.
once we're inside that date, if we get a low appraisal, that's why it's important if the appraisal is taking a long time to get to be on top of that, like if they're backed out, or we may need to extend the financing period or whatever, just because there's no issues. We want to protect our buyers' earnest money at the end of the day. We don't want them losing earnest money because they may not be able to buy a property again if they lose that 1%. Once we get past the financing period, their earnest money goes hard, and now we're in the homeward stretch. But disasters can still happen in that last stretch of the game. So we're past
Well,
appraisal.
I can think of one where we needed a septic inspection that we didn't get until I think it was 3 days before closing, and the septic was pretty much shot and needed to be completely redone, and the seller didn't have the money for it. I mean,
Why did that come? Why did an issue like that come up so late in the contract period?
it wasn't caught, and the lender didn't notify us. I mean, I'm not even sure if it was on the listing, to be honest. Um, but the lender didn't find out about it until she got the appraisal back, seeing that we needed to go ahead and get a septic inspection because we hadn't had one done.
So that probably would have been something that a good lender probably could have brought to our attention during the finance period or the inspection period, at least, or during the appraisal period.
Well, we didn't, yeah, that didn't come up until after the appraisal had been done. And I think the appraisal had gotten delayed because it was coming up, it was going to come back pretty close to the closing day.
And one thing about the appraisal, I think we forgot to mention is that sometimes appraisers, instead of like a low appraisal, it's like a non-appraisal. We've had situations where the appraiser just wouldn't appraise the property, especially in like an FHA or VA. But I mean, this could be with hard money or conventional as well. And Aiden, you've probably, I'm not sure if this is if y'all run into this before, but a good example, we had I think it was a conventional buyer, and the appraiser rejected the appraisal because of a foundation issue. So we're
Hmm.
starting to see more. It's not the inspector that's pointing out these issues with the property. It's we're seeing more appraisers, even on conventional loans, aren't we? So we're
Yeah.
seeing some deals. Aiden, y'all run into any of that? Is that, I mean, y'all are more liberal with your with things because obviously we're working with investors and investors are always fixing foundation. And are there any issues that you've run into that killed the appraisal that wasn't financially related?
Mm, yeah, I mean, yes, there's a lot of things, right? But yeah, it's generally going to be in regards to condition, right? If it's just in far worse shape than it was purported to be,
Hmm.
it's something of concern. The biggest thing that I think is that happens more than you would think is it just being a different size. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
A lot of times it'll measure out because the appraiser does their own measurements, right?
yeah,
And it's not always going to match up with what is listed on the MLS. So take a look through the measurements in a deal before you get too deep as well. Just eyeball it and say this doesn't feel
yeah,
like 1,600 square feet. Maybe it's because it's not, right? Or if it was advertised as 1,600 square feet because there is a bonus room, like an ADU, right? Like a little
yeah,
office off the back. That's not 300 extra square feet, right? That is the base square footage of the property plus a bonus room, and that's how the appraiser sees it, and that's how it's going to be listed on the sheet.
yeah.
So, watching out for the square footage and making sure it's as advertised is definitely
So,
an
so
important one.
definitely discrepancy with square footage, any critical repairs that are going to obviously be way more than what the buyer was expecting. Just to kind of wrap things up, we run into this is the part of the game. If there's any type of title issue, we'll run into a title issue. Um,
Hmm.
for instance,
HOA docs, those take forever to get back, and that's
yeah,
always been a hold up.
yeah, we got to be on top of HOA. We got to play nice with them because they're usually like volunteers at part time or third party. Um, what are some of the title issues? Like we we I remember the Gilchrist property. I'll never forget that one. We get like 2 or 3 days from closing, and we realize that there's an unclear title chain dating back to like the 1800s, where some cowboy signed a contract on the back of a horse, and then all of a sudden, like there's some owner of a property that has been dead for 150 years, and there's no way to you have to go to their heirs. Like that was crazy. Like that property will end up, I don't even know what to do with a situation like that when it goes
I don't,
like it's like 100 years back.
oh, I don't
Uh,
think it's sellable.
we've had encroachments, survey issues where we find out that, for instance, the multifamily in Pasadena that was going over the boundary line. We had another property, remember that industrial property where the boundary line was going right through the middle of the building? We've had multiple like that where get the survey back and we find that there's a property line going through the middle of the building.
Well, or there was a different seller on that one. They had only
Hmm.
signed over like half of the property.
Yeah.
And they were
And so,
like in another country or something, or
yeah, they were
they
in,
weren't reachable.
yeah, we couldn't get a hold of them. They wouldn't transfer, they wouldn't cooperate. And then we had two multifamilies in Bay Cliff. I'll never forget this one. And our client, he passed away, and he gave one side to one family, one side to the other family. But those two sides of the family were like they hated each other. And the property line, the building that we were selling was over the property line. So it was just like Hatfields and McCoys, and they were just it was just a standout. It was a stalemate. So we've seen issues like that. So survey issues, measurement issues, major repairs. We got 4 minutes left. Any questions for the closer before we end the day? Any thoughts? Did you learn anything? Give you 30 seconds.
Austin.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it was good to hear Alicia's take on the option period,
Hmm.
and as well as Aiden then confirming some issues that go on, and the info about the appraisal. That was really informative.
Yeah, Aiden, appreciate you jumping on, man. You add a lot of value. Glad you were on the call today.
Of course.
Alicia, any other thoughts? I know you have a lot of dumpster fires rolling downhill right now. So
Yeah, it never stops. No, I think we covered a good amount of topics today for contracts, a lot of what's going on, or what I'm seeing across the board.
yeah, absolutely. Well, we got a lot of work to do. Just know if you're investing in real estate or you're selling, buying, investing, selling, we have seen a lot of crazy stuff. So we know how to navigate. Alicia has been dealing with me and some pretty wild uh, contracts. We've done everything from seller financing. We've worked a lot with creative financing. We've seen crazy stuff from our sellers dying while they're under contract. We've seen sellers abandoning the property while we're under contract. We've seen, I don't know, what's the craziest thing you can think of off the top of your head, Alicia?
Well, one that I'm dealing with right now, we have the buyer and they had an executor sign on the seller side, except they didn't go through the proper channels, so he's not actually the executor yet, so we don't even have a contract and we were supposed to close last week.
Oh, that's
So
frustrating.
now it has to go into probate, and it's just all this like it was just weird. It's like I don't know. It's a weird navigation.
In the state of Texas, probate sucks. Probate is not it takes forever. Nobody communicates well. It's crazy. So time factor being so important, 100% live. We've got time kills deals. So if we're looking for investment properties, we don't want to be tied up with a bad one. So, all right, any final words, Alicia?
Well, if anybody needs a TC, you know where to reach me.
Have Alicia write the offer. Otherwise, you're going to screw it up. Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining the call. Appreciate y'all. Next month, the month of May, it's Multifamily May. So we're going to start talking more about multifamily investments. We're going to talk about how to evaluate a deal, how to evaluate finances, how to calculate cap rate, and go through the financial side of things. So a lot to learn, a lot to teach about. If you have any requests or you're dying to learn something, let me know. Everyone on this call has my number. If you're watching this on YouTube, comment below, message me. Let me know if you want to be on the live call. Everybody, you guys can invite other people to these calls. We're only going to be doing these on Mondays at 12:30. So thank you for spending your lunch hour with us, Elisha. Thank you so much for your time. Go back and put those fires out. Love you guys. Have a great day. Bye.